Assalamualaikum. Today we are going to discuss about our chosen country, which is Somalia. First of all, we are interested in Somalia because we want to know what's happened to their economy since they are being labeled as one of the world's poorest country. Let's start with their main economic, which is trade, agriculture, and livestock raising, with lots of traditional and informal economic activity. The economy of Somalia is mostly based on agriculture, with specific focus on the production of products such as sugarcane, sorghum, bananas, and maize. Given that Somalia is home to one of the greatest population of livestock in Africa, animals such as camels, goats, and sheep also make an important economic contribution. This pastoralist way of life, which is nomadic, is still important to the nation's economy. Despite dealing with corruption, Somalia has shown modest improvement. To understand its economic development, let's move on to our first country assessment, which is GDP. Based on what we found, the latest GDP growth of Somalia, which was in 2022, is 4.8%. This actually shows a very significant increase if we compare it to the years before 1990, where their GDP remained constant. We also found that in recent years, GDP in Somalia has spiked from 2012 until 2022. The highest GDP ever recorded in the latest year is 8.3 billion, World Bank data. You might be wondering where does this number come from? The answer is GDP in Somalia is mostly made from agriculture and industrial products. Some famous products produced by Somalia are textiles, clothing, intellectual property rights, and trade-related investment. Now, we know that Somalia are doing goods, aren't they? To know that, let's compare with their neighboring country Ethiopia, whose GDP is 126.78 billion. Let's also not forget Kenya, who also has higher GDP. These differences show that Somalia is still way behind its neighboring country and needs major improvement in some areas to increase the country output. Let's not forget that GDP is determined by their people, so let's see how Somalis are doing. Let me ask you, will you be happy when you earn money after working for a long time? Absolutely. But what if the money is far from enough? Yes, that's what happened to Somalia. Nearly 70% of Somalis live below the poverty line, which defined as earning less than $2.15 a day, with numbers being higher in rural areas among nomadic pastoralists, and 90% live in multidimensional poverty. Despite their high poverty, they have nature on their sides. Better rains are boosting agriculture production and private consumptions. Food inflation slowed to 3.6% in January to July 2020 from double-digit rate a year ago. Nevertheless, poverty remains high and widespread, estimated at 73% in 2023. Real GDP growth averaged only 2% per year in 2008 and 2022, while real GDP per capita growth averaged 0.8% per year. Repeated shocks have eroded households' assets based on purchasing power, increasing the risk of more people falling into poverty. Labor force participation rates are exceptionally low with large gender gaps. Only 1/3 of men and 12% of women participates in the labor markets. Between 2023 and 2035, the poverty rate is expected to remain around 72%. Accelerating the rate of poverty reduction will necessitate the policy and public intervention investment that boost productivity, strengthen resilience, create jobs, and promote pro-poor programs that focus on women and youth. We now know what's working in Somalia looks like, but what about living? Are their students doing good? How about their people's healthcare? Let's take a look. Somalia has a total of 544,000 pupils enrolled in primary and secondary educations. Of these students, approximately 84% were enrolled in primary schools. Although youth in this age group may still be in schools and working towards their educational goals, it is notable that approximately 69% of youth have no formal educations, and 80% of youth have attained at most incomplete primary educations, meaning that in total 86% of 15 to 24 years old have not completed primary schools. 3 decades of conflict nearly destroyed Somalia's health and education system, which are characterized by poor quality, insufficient access, and inadequate resources. As a result, nearly 85% of children are not enrolled in school. In Somalia, girls face additional barriers to attending schools, including security restrictions, financial obstacles, early marriage, and adherence to strict gender. Nearly 79% of female youth of secondary schools age are out of school, compared to 66% of male youth of the same age. For youth of secondary school age, the biggest disparity can be seen between the poorest and the richest youth. Last but not least, Somali's income. Their income GDP per capita is gross domestic product divided by median population. I believe by now, we all know how to calculate GDP per capita, so let's straight to the point. Data are in current US dollars. Somalia GDP per capita for 2020 was 46,000, 460% increase from 2021. Somalia GDP and so on. Alright, so and a 7.66, 79% increase from 2008. Now, and as an economist, do you think that we can solve all this problem faced by Somalia? If yes, then how? So stay with us. We are going to tell you how exactly we suggest economists solve this problem faced by Somalia.
So next, for our policy for improvement for the country of Somalia. So first of all, the first policy we suggest to improve Somalia's measurements is economic diversification. So what is the economic diversification? So economic diversification is the process of finding new sources of income for the country of Somalia throughout different industries and sectors. So, for example, let's take the new economic policy of Malaysia, which introduced FELPRA and FELDA, which heavily focus on the agriculture industry to improve rural areas. So, by implementing the new economic policy of Malaysia to Somalia, we allow Somalia to fully utilize their available resources from the livestock and agriculture sectors, such as corn, sesame, cowpeas, vegetables and fruits, which are, of course, Somalia's native resources. So this will ensure self-sustainability among Somalian people, as well as ensure food security and solve poverty and increase their life expectancy. So for our next policy, we suggest that the government of Somalia improve healthcare and education development. This is because based on the Human Development Index of Somalia, it can be seen that the majority of Somalian children and adolescents are lacking education and healthcare access. So to combat this, we suggest that Somalia's government invest more in the education invest more in the education sector by building more schools and universities, as well as give scholarships to successful students, to talented individuals, like how Malaysia is doing with the JPA and MARA scholarship, as well as making school, primary and secondary school free for all children in Somalia, just like how they do it in Canada. So this is to ensure that education is accessible to all Somalian children and people, which will help increase Somalia's literacy rate, as well as create a more empowered and educated society. Secondly, we also suggest that the government invest in the health industry by providing free health services to all Somalian people, just like they implement in the United Kingdom, as well as create a health insurance system that is mandatory for all of Somalian people, like how they implement it in Switzerland. This is to ensure that healthcare is accessible to all Somalian people, which will help improve our Human Development Index of Somalia. So for our last and final policy for improvement, we suggest that the government must take a stance on population control of Somalia. This is because Somalia is facing a very high birth rate. This will cause overpopulation that will lead to lack of employment, excessive waste, as well as criminal activity in the country. So, to combat this, the government needs to promote family planning and introduce sex education in school syllabus, like how they do it in New Zealand. Besides that, they also need to implement policies that encourage people to have fewer children, like how they do it in Singapore, called the two-child policy, which will give family with two child or less benefits. This will help the government control the population growth of Somalia, and to ensure that it doesn't lead to overpopulation, so that in the long run, the country's economy and other measurements can be improved. So in conclusion, since the time of Somalia's civil war, Somalia's economy has never truly recovered. Although it did grow a little when a new government was formed, it is still considered to be an undeveloped country by the rest of the world. This is due to various reasons that has already been mentioned, which is weak centralized institution, limited access to education and healthcare, as well as high poverty rate, low income and rapid population. Besides that, Somalia is also facing external factors that cause the economy to suffer. That cannot even be controlled by its own government, such as drought and flood, which hinder productivity of crops and farming, which are Somalia's main source of income at this point. So because of this, it is clear that Somalia needs an economic reform in order to turn it from an undeveloped country to a developing country, which is what the policies we suggested hope to achieve. That is all from us. Thank you.